tell.
The Pet Clinic on Today, sponsored by petfix-club.com. Love your pet? Join the club.
Now, we all know that a loved pet is one of the family, but did you know that hugging your pet, allowing him or her to kiss your face and in some cases lick your dinner plates could be putting you and your family's health at risk? Pete the vet is here to tell us all. Pete, how is this bad for us? This has been happening for years.
It is and has for years, and indeed there's a risk there. There always has been a risk there. And I think most people are a bit aware of it, but they're not quite aware enough of it, and they're also not aware of how products have changed and how it's so much easier to look after that side of it.
Okay, because I always had a fear of, say, particularly male dogs licking certain areas and then coming up and licking your face.
Yeah.
That's the obvious one for me, you know.
But that's yucky. It's very yucky.
It's very yucky.
Yeah, but it's not a big risk to your health.
Okay.
The particular risk that we're aware of now is that the dog roundworm, basically can be, if a dog isn't wormed regularly, then their feces, their droppings, are going to have roundworm eggs in the droppings. And funny enough, fresh poo isn't dangerous because the poo has to be in the environment for 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
And after 2 or 3 weeks, the eggs are then incubated and hatched into larvae. And those are the things that are dangerous, the larvae. So old poo is what the real risk is. And that's why it's so important to pick up after dogs.
Okay.
So basically, there's no old poo in the environment.
So, for example, and we have a problem with dog poo a lot in different towns and cities all around the country. For example, if that happened to be in a poo and somebody comes along in a wheelchair or a buggy, and then that could be dragged into somebody's car and into somebody's house.
Yes.
So not alone would you be protecting yourself, but you're protecting other people as well, Pete.
That's what it's all about. And that's why it's also, as well as everything else we're going to talk about, children do need to wash their hands before eating, because if they get a trace of old poo on their hand, and it could be weeks old, so it mightn't even look like poo.
Yeah. They wouldn't even notice it, know it's there.
Nothing visible. That could then pass on the worm to them. And if the worm, infective larvae, goes into a child's digestive tract, then it hatches into worms in their intestines, then it goes into their bloodstream and it goes around their body. And even then, it might just settle in their muscles and cause no harm at all to them. But if it happens to settle at the back of their eye, then it can cause blindness.
Yeah.
Now, this is really, really, really rare, but it's easy to prevent. And that's why we're talking about, first of all, picking up dog poo, secondly, washing your hands, and thirdly, treating your dog regularly for worms so the eggs aren't there in the first place.
When you say regularly, Pete, what does that mean?
Well, it does depend on the individual dog and the whole household and so on. If there's young children around or humans who might be immunocompromised, then it's once a month worming. If there's not that situation, then every 3 months is probably adequate.
We've 2 types of worms here. We have roundworm and lungworm.
Well, lungworm is the next one, okay? So roundworm is the first one. We've dealt with that.
We've dealt with that, okay.
Every 1 to 3 months with the right product. Lungworm is different because lungworm doesn't affect humans in any way. There is 0 risk to humans from lungworm. And in most dogs, lungworm just causes a bit of a cough because the lungworm settles into their lungs. And if they're coughing, then you go to their vet and you get treatment and it gets sorted. But that's not the real risk, funnily enough. The real risk is that if the dog has lungworm, their blood can stop clotting.
Okay.
And because the blood stops clotting, that makes them vulnerable to internal hemorrhages.
Okay.
So what we know is that a very small number of dogs actually have, young healthy dogs die overnight from a brain hemorrhage.
Okay.
And on the autopsy, we find that they also had lungworm. So the lungworm was stopping the blood from clotting, they had a brain hemorrhage and they died. Now this again is really, really, really rare. But we do see a few cases every year. And for that reason, it makes sense if your dog is vulnerable to lungworm, and they'll be vulnerable to lungworm if they eat slugs and snails, if you see them doing that, or if you see them chewing lots of grass, then they can be vulnerable to lungworm. And those dogs...
Because they'll pick it up off the grass, is it?
Because the slugs and snails can be so small you don't see them, and they're actually on the blades of grass.
Okay.
And so when your dog chews grass, it's actually swallowing slugs and snails.
Okay, so if you see your dog chewing grass today or in the next couple of weeks, stop the dog doing that.
Yeah, I would stop, but more than that, I would say if your dog is prone to that kind of behaviour, then you should use regular lungworm treatment. And the issue with whereas some parasite control for general roundworm and so on, you can buy that on online websites, in pet shops.
Yeah. And is that something you just spread on their food?
Well, those would be roundworm treatments would be tablets generally, but if your dog needs lungworm treatment, if your dog falls into that category, so it's a slug and snail eater or a grass chewer, then you need lungworm treatment, which is can also treat for roundworms, But the thing about it is it's prescription only.
Okay.
You can't buy that over the counter or on websites. So for lungworm treatment, you do have to go to your vet to get a prescription-only product.
Pete, we've dealt there with the internal parasites, but I suppose the external ones, the ones that I suppose a lot of us would be more familiar with, like fleas, for example.
Fleas are the most common external parasite.
Do you start scratching yourself when you start talking about fleas?
Even just the word fleas.
I think everyone at home does as well.
A funny thing also, I was once doing television with a swan on my lap because I was talking about swans, and I was sitting there on the couch with this big swan, and in the middle of the conversation, there were little lice on the swan, and I could feel them crawling from the swan down my neck, and I could feel the sensation of lice crawling down my neck.
Pete.
Live on television. It was really horrible. Anyway,
back to the poor
not
doggy.
to worry. Back to fleas. Well, nobody wants fleas,
yes.
right? Nobody wants fleas. And there's several problems with fleas. First thing is, Ireland is warm enough outside that between April and September, fleas can breed outside. So if your dog or your cat goes where there are other animals, there's a high chance they'll pick up fleas.
Okay.
So you could wait until they have fleas and they're itching and treat them then, but what a lot of people prefer to do these days is to prevent fleas in the first place, and that does make good sense.
Okay, so how do you do that then?
So how you do that is you use, there's a number of different products. I've got some of them here.
Yeah.
We've got, you can get spot-on products like this one here. You can get the flea collars. I don't like those so much because they tend to be stronger chemicals and not as effective as the spot-on products. And what you can also get, which is very important, is a spray for the house. Because if you get... If your dog or cat gets fleas, the fleas don't just live on the animal, they hop off the animal and they lay their eggs in the carpets and the furnishings. And those eggs can last for up to a year. Before they hatch out. So that's one of the reasons why people treat for fleas and they still find they have a problem. You absolutely need to spray the house for fleas if you have a flea problem.
And how often would you have to spray it, Pete?
Just if there's a flea problem.
Just once?
The spray lasts for about a year, so it sorts the thing out.
Oh, good.
But if your pet does bring fleas back, as well as treating your pet for fleas, you also need to treat your house for fleas.
Okay.
It's really, really important.
Lice and ticks then as well.
Yeah, so lice and
similar?
ticks and mites, well, they're external parasites. Again, they're in your pet's skin and coat. And some of the products I've mentioned for fleas will actually treat for them as well. Also, you can use a device, if your pet just gets an occasional tick, you can use a device like this. This is a special tick remover.
Yeah.
And what that does is that allows you to loop onto the tick and twist it round, and it just pulls the tick out very neatly.
Okay.
You have to be aware that ticks can carry something called Lyme disease that can affect humans. So if you are dealing with ticks on your pet, you should make sure that you wear rubber gloves and dispose of the tick properly.
I think anybody who goes to the bog as well, humans could bring that device with them during the summer as well to take them out.
It's a great device. But, you know, like with the worms, it makes sense to prevent parasites. And that means using a regular spot-on product, as I've mentioned, or if you're concerned, again, lungworm products, you get from the vet, the prescription-only ones, often they will also treat for fleas and ticks at the same time. So there's lots of options out there
Lots
now.
of options. Pete, if people at home have questions for you, where will they find you?
They should go to petfix-club.ie, that's petfix-club.ie, or .com. We have them both.
Oh, brilliant. Pete, thank you very much. Great to have you.
Thank you, Daithi.
And, of course, Pete will be back in a few weeks' time, and he will be talking about arthritis in pets.
The Pet Clinic on Today, sponsored by petfix-club.com. Love your pet? Join the club.